following is a presentation of the Reviewing Network Sports. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the NFL Network, and kind of starting off on a little bit of a sour note here because I have some news that might be very disappointing to some of you folks out there, but as you know, let the music stop here, but as you know, this past week was the college football playoffs, and the reveal of the college football playoffs for 2025, and surprise, surprise, our show did not get put on there in any way, shape, or form. So, it pains me to say this, but we are withdrawing our consideration for playing in any of these bowl games. Do you think we want to play in something like the Pop-Tarts Bowl? I mean, get the hell out of here. That is a horrible way to begin this show. But you get the idea of what I'm trying to reference here if you've been living under a rock the last couple of days. Notre Dame decided to be complete and utter bitches about the fact that they didn't make the college football playoff, even though Miami beat them early on in the season. And, hey, you want to get in there? You should have beaten Miami in week 1. Instead, was it week 2? It's either week 1 or week 2, but it was early on in the season, but that loss basically was the reason why they did not get in, and Miami got in, even though the AACC champion Duke Blue Devils didn't get in there. But Miami got thrown in there. But you get the idea. What Notre Dame's doing right now, I think is really bad right now for their program alone. It makes them look like clowns, but it makes this whole college football playoff thing even more ridiculous than it was the year before. The fact that a team like James Madison and Tulane get in, and they get the toughest start of the playoffs, having to face off against teams like James Madison's got to play Oklahoma to start the playoffs. Oregon. I thought I knew it was Oregon, but I didn't. I for some reason thought it was Oklahoma. No, Oklahoma plays later. Plays actually the first game of the playoffs on December 19th, but James Madison's got to play Oregon, and then you've got Tulane playing Ole Miss, and a lot of people are complaining about the fact that, well, you can't have these teams there because nobody's going to want to watch it. Well, you know what? That's your problem. That's your problem right there. And yeah, sorry that Notre Dame and BYU didn't win enough games. Sorry Virginia couldn't beat Duke on the ACC championship game to get into the playoffs. I mean, the playoffs overall for the college football playoff bracket really is ridiculous, but there are some cool things about the bracket overall. I know we talk about the NFL here, but hey, there are some cool things about this bracket in general here. Most importantly, the fact that the Indiana, why can't I remember their name now? The Indiana Hoosiers? Yeah, the Indiana Hoosiers. I mean, they beat Ohio State, the defending champions in the Big 12 championship, and essentially got the number 1 seed in the playoff bracket because of that. And I think that's pretty cool. I like what Kirk Cignetti has done to that team since getting there. I like Fernando Mendoza. I think he's going to be I think he's got a good shot of winning the Heisman this weekend. And it's going to be cool to see if this team can actually go all the way to the championship, because they've got the best odds now. They essentially got to play the winner of Alabama and Oklahoma, and I think they've got a good chance. If they can continue to do what they did against Ohio State into the playoffs, I think this could be really good. I think the college football playoff bracket overall could be a lot more interesting and a lot more fun if we don't have a repeat of last year, where you have all these massive blowouts. Every single game up into the national championship, which even that was a massive a blowout for the most part. I mean, every game was not that fun to watch, and there's only a couple of games here that are not quite as fun as they could be. Like, yeah, James Madison, Oregon, and Tulane and Ole Miss pretty much look like going to be shutout wins for Oregon and Ole Miss. But, James Madison and Tulane have a chance to prove everybody wrong. But looking at the odds right now, Oregon's a 21.5 point favorite, and Mississippi's a 17.5 point favorite, even without Lane Kiffin there. But then you got interesting matchups like Miami and Texas A&M and Alabama and Oklahoma. And, the possibilities are there that we could have something very, very interesting happening with all these matchups coming forward. And, again, the hope is that we actually get competitive matchups this time around. The reason why the playoffs didn't work last year for college football was the fact that nearly every single game was a blowout, and before the other team could even get a chance to come back into it, it was already too little too late. So, yeah, these are big shoes to fill, and yeah, this playoff bracket's going to need to be really, really good this year if they're going to have to top what they have to be better than last year, pretty much. That's what I'm trying to say here, but we're not here to talk about the college football playoff bracket here. This is not the main focus of our show. This is the NFL Network, and we are now 4 weeks away from the end of the regular season, and from this point forward, every single team is done with their bye weeks. All 16 teams will play for the next 4 weeks, and only 12 is only, now I completely forgot how many, only 14 teams will be fighting for the Super Bowl in 2026, it's the beginning of 2026. But speaking of the Super Bowl in general, you hear that noise that's not our regular intro from last year because it's now the Sunday Night NFL Rewatch opening, but it's a completely different but familiar opening right there. Well, you know what that means. It's time now to get to the nitty-gritty here. 4 weeks to go until the end of the regular season. You know what that means. It's time for our first look at the reviewing the NFL Network's Path to the Playoffs. I don't know what is wrong with me today, but yeah, that is not going to be the new intro for the foreseeable future. I'm sorry for that, but yeah, we can actually look at the path to the playoffs today because we are now officially in the final month of figuring out who's going to go where. And let's take a look first at the AFC and how this week's games changed the course of everything, because the Denver Broncos are sitting comfortably at 11-2, and they have a chance to clinch a playoff spot, as do the New England Patriots. We'll touch on that in just a little bit. But Denver has the tiebreaker over New England because New England lost to the Raiders earlier at the start of the season, and the Broncos just sweep the Raiders this past week. So Denver currently has the advantage. Denver and New England, like I said, have a chance to clinch a playoff spot. New England sitting there at 11-2 in the second position, leading the AFC East. Denver, of course, leading the AFC West. The Jacksonville Jaguars finally moved ahead of the Indianapolis Colts, and really it was not that hard to do, especially considering what happened to the Colts quarterback situation, which we'll get to in a moment, because, that got much more hilariously bad for the Colts, but not because of what happened to Daniel Jones, but because of who they brought in to bring him in there. The Pittsburgh Steelers are back in the playoffs once again after beating Baltimore, a situation that I did not think was going to happen. I think a lot of people really were not expecting it to happen, and let's be honest, probably shouldn't have happened. We'll touch on my reasoning for that later on, but the wild card spots right now, it's very competitive. The Chargers, with that big win yesterday over the Philadelphia Eagles, got to the number 5 spot. They're sitting right there at the top. Buffalo right there is at number 6. They came back in pretty good comeback fashion against the Cincinnati Bengals, who gave it their all in that one, but 2 critical interceptions in the fourth quarter really did the Cincinnati Bengals in. It might have cost them the playoffs in general. And then you have the Houston Texans going into Kansas City and just, wow. I mean, again, kind of like with the Ravens, it was mostly the Texans it was mostly the Chiefs with critical mistakes in the fourth quarter. Yeah, Kansas City kind of shot themselves in the foot, and now because of that, they're not going to be hosting a playoff game this year. I mean, they're still in the playoff hunt, but it will be a new champion for the AFC West title. And again, we'll touch on that in just a little bit here, but still in the hunt are the Colts, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and even the Bengals, even though one more loss and essentially they're out of the running. The Jets, the Browns, the Raiders join the Titans for being eliminated from the postseason contention in the AFC. Moving over to the NFC, things significantly changed, mostly because of what happened between the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers, but that was kind of to be expected, and the Bears will have a chance to rebound from that in a couple of weeks' time. But we have a new number 1 in the NFC conference right now. The Rams are back on top at 10-3. Packers are sitting there at 9-3-1 with the win over the Bears. The Eagles are still in there, but Dallas is looking to make some noise next week, and they got a favorable competition ahead of them against Minnesota. But Philadelphia, yeah, that loss to the Chargers last night was pretty brutal, with Jalen Hurts throwing 4 interceptions, including the one in overtime. Tampa Bay still hanging in there at 7-6, despite what happened against New Orleans, which, Yeah, we're going to touch on that because Jesus Christ, Tampa Bay. Seattle's still hanging in there at 10-3. Remember, the Rams and the Seahawks meet next Thursday night in what will essentially be possibly the NFC's number one seed at stake for one of these two teams. San Francisco on their bye week this week at 9-4, and Chicago sitting there at 9-4. Detroit is still hanging in there. Carolina is still hanging in there. Dallas is still hanging in there, and even Minnesota is not officially knocked out yet. Not yet, at least, but we'll touch on some of the elimination scenarios for both conferences in just a little bit. But Atlanta is out, Arizona is out, New Orleans is out, Washington is out, and New York is out. So no real surprises there. But in terms of this week's playoff scenarios, it goes like this. The Denver Broncos play the Green Bay Packers, and they can clinch a playoff berth with a win against Green Bay, a tie or a Chargers loss, a tie or a Jacksonville loss, a tie, a Houston loss or tie, a Denver tie, an Indianapolis loss or tie, a Houston loss or tie, and an Indianapolis loss or tie, as long as both games don't end in a tie. New England has a tougher schedule, has a tougher way to get to the playoffs because they're facing the Buffalo Bills this week. New England can easily clinch the AFC East division with a win over Buffalo in New England, but they can also clinch a playoff berth with a win against Buffalo, a tie with the Los Angeles Chargers, losing, a tie with Houston losing or tie, a tie with Indianapolis losing or tying, a tie with Jacksonville losing, and a Houston loss or tie and an Indianapolis loss or tie as long as both games don't end in a tie. Which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because it says Houston loss or tie or Indianapolis loss or tie as long as both games don't end in a tie. So why don't you just say Houston loss plus Indianapolis loss, or if the games don't end in a tie? I mean, that would make more sense than having it be like this. I don't get what it says here, but hey, this is what the NFL put out. But and the Rams, it's simple. Win against the Detroit Lions, they're in the playoffs. They clinch a playoff berth. They can't clinch the division just yet, but yeah, so there you go. Those are the playoff clinching scenarios. Now, there are elimination scenarios as well. Minnesota will be eliminated with a loss, a Chicago win, or a Detroit win. Detroit is knocked out of one-seed contention with a Detroit loss. Philadelphia will be kicked out of a one-seed contention with a loss, a Rams win, or a Seattle win. A Philadelphia loss, a Rams win, a San Francisco win or tie, Green Bay win or Chicago win, a Philadelphia loss, a Rams tie, and a Seattle win. Philadelphia loss, LA Rams tie, Seattle tie, San Francisco win or tie, Green Bay win, Chicago win, or a Philadelphia loss, Seattle win, San Francisco win or tie, Green Bay win, or Chicago win. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers' number one seed elimination scenarios are still in progress, but they can be knocked out of one seed contention with a loss, a Tampa Bay tie or a Rams win, a tie or a Seattle win, tie, San Francisco win, tie, Green Bay win, tie, Chicago win, a Rams win plus a Seattle win, a Rams tie, and a Seattle win. Carolina would be knocked out of one seed contention with a loss, a tie, and a Seattle win, a tie or a Rams win, tie, and San Francisco win. Pretty much all the same stuff we talked about before. Green Bay would need to win, Chicago tie, Chicago win, yada, yada, yada. Over in the AFC, Cincinnati is eliminated from the AFC North title contention and playoff contention with a loss, a tie, and a Pittsburgh win. One of those two scenarios would do it. Miami would be eliminated from playoff contention with a loss to Pittsburgh on Monday night, a Buffalo winner tie, a Houston winner tie, a loss, a Buffalo win and tie, or an Indianapolis winner tie, a loss, a Houston win, and an Indianapolis win. And then here's the crazy one here, two of them. Miami tie, Buffalo win, Jacksonville winner tie, Los Angeles Chargers winner tie, Houston win, Indianapolis winner tie, Miami tie, Buffalo win, Jacksonville winner tie, Los Angeles winner tie, Houston tie, Indianapolis win. Again, making it much more complicated than it needs to be. But here's where it gets very interesting for one of these teams, because Kansas City is already out of the AFC West division title, and if they're not careful, they could be eliminated from playoff contention altogether. It would have to take a loss by Kansas City, a Buffalo winner tie, a Jacksonville winner tie, or a Houston win. Or a Kansas City loss, Buffalo winner tie, Jacksonville winner tie, Houston tie, or Indianapolis tie. Kansas City loss, Buffalo winner tie, Jacksonville winner tie, Indianapolis win. Kansas City loss, Buffalo winner tie, Houston win, or Indianapolis winner tie. So a lot of things would need to happen, but yeah, Kansas City could be eliminated this weekend, possibly. Buffalo was knocked out of division title and one-seed contention with a loss to New England. So for the Steelers, Pittsburgh could be knocked out of one-seed contention with a loss or tie, a Denver winner tie, or a New England winner tie, or a Chargers win, or a Houston loss or tie. I mean, really, nobody was really expecting the Steelers to do that at this point. Houston is knocked out of one seed contention with a loss or a Denver plus a Denver win or tie, a loss plus a New England win or tie, or a tie or in Denver win. And finally, Indianapolis is knocked out of one seed contention with a loss, a Denver win or tie, a loss or plus a New England win or tie, a loss plus a Chargers win, a tie plus a Denver win, and a tie plus a New England win. So there you go. That's all the scenarios for Week 15 that we'll have to look at here going into this coming week in general. So, yeah, there we go. That's our first look at the path to the playoffs. So let's go ahead and get to my regular feature on this show, and that is, of course, my weekly power rankings. And once again, a lot of familiar faces in the top 5 in general, including a team that has been number 1 very much for much of the year in general, after dropping out all the way down to 32 after getting embarrassed by Green Bay. But we'll get to them in just a little bit here. Speaking of Green Bay, they are number 5 on this list for what they did against Chicago. Dominated that team overall very well. It was a much closer battle than most people expected. It only took the second half to really get to that for Chicago. But Chicago was in there from the very end, and all it took was that big interception by Keyshawn Nixon to really seal the deal for Chicago. I mean, Green Bay played pretty good against them, but Chicago had their own problems that we're going to touch on when we get to them in my predictions overall. But there they are sitting at number 5. Number 4, the Los Angeles Rams. Not really much of a surprise. One of the best teams in football. Putting on yet another dominant performance this weekend against now I can't remember who they played this week. The Cardinals, but then again, it's the Cardinals. But nevertheless, Rams are still one of the top teams right now in the NFL, and I think they're still very much in contention to potentially, eke out a win for potentially the number 1 seed at this point. But we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. They got a tough schedule ahead, starting with this week. Number 3, the Buffalo Bills are back up at top. We saw, like I said before, the Cincinnati Bengals really gave the Bills a scare in the first half overall, and it looked like they were going to go ahead and pull off an upset win that would have kept the Bengals in the playoffs. But then Buffalo came all the way back. It was a snow game. It was an amazing game to watch. If you didn't watch it, you missed out on something really special. And really, the fourth quarter was the one that really cemented it. Josh Allen had his biggest run ever for a touchdown. There was there was an interception that was run back for a pick 6, and then at the next drive, it was another interception that really kind of sealed the deal for the Buffalo Bills. And still hanging in there, and they needed that win big time because New England is right around the corner, and they're going to need everything that they can to beat them and hopefully stay alive in the AFC East hunt. Number 2, still staying strong, and that's the Denver Broncos that's sitting there at 11-2. Yeah, I know they had a cakewalk win with the Raiders, and they actually did compete this time around. And there's people that is when I show these power rankings, they always talk about, well, why don't you put the Patriots on there? Because the Patriots have had a soft schedule. Their toughest game that they've had all season long was the Buffalo Bills. And yeah, they beat the Buffalo Bills, and I'll give them credit for that. But I'm sorry, their schedule was not as good as the Denver Broncos did. With every team that they've had to face, Detroit, the Dallas Cowboys, the Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City, all these big wins they've had. They were close wins, but you know what? They were much better wins than what New England had. I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody says out there. Denver had the much better wins than New England did so far this season. And hopefully that'll continue. They've got a big test this weekend with actually the next couple of games. They got some big tests: Green Bay, Jacksonville. 2 of the top teams right now in the respective conference, in the respective divisions. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see if they can continue on this pace. They've won 10 straight. So, you have to give them credit where credit is due. They are doing a much better job than I think people are really expecting them to do. And then number 1 on the list, the Detroit Lions are back on top, and rightfully so, because they've had a tough task of beating Dallas overall. Dallas was coming off a hot streak, coming off of the big wins against the 2 Super Bowl representatives this past February, and they did, and they did a pretty good job of keeping Dallas in check overall, and may have just saved their season by this point overall. They've got a tough stretch ahead. They got to figure out how to beat the Rams. They got Chicago once again coming up, and all bets are off right now for the Detroit Lions. I mean, can they hold up? Can they still hang in there? Because Green Bay and Chicago are ahead of them right now. They have a tough stretch with the Rams, the Steelers, the Vikings, and the Bears. It's a tough schedule for them overall, so they've got to get these wins coming up ahead. And needless to say, I don't think it's going to be an easy task for them this time around. And, those critical mistakes in those games in those last 2 games before the Cowboys game really, I think, hurt them in the long run. But we'll see what happens as we go along here. We still got 4 weeks to find out if the Detroit Lions will be back in postseason football by this time next month. But we'll find out in just a little bit with the power rankings. And that's going to essentially wrap up my power rankings for this week. So with that said, let me go ahead and stop stuttering and go ahead and move on to the Week 15 predictions. Good Lord. And Week 14 was easily the worst predictions I'd had so far. 6 of 14, 42.8%, the worst week possible. And really, wishful thinking on my part. I thought Dallas was going to continue that comeback stretch that really good stretch they were on after what they did to Kansas City and Philadelphia. That turned out to be wrong. I thought the Steelers were going to lose to the Ravens. That turned out to be wrong. I thought Houston was going to have no chance of beating Kansas City, but lo and behold, I was wrong on that too. And I was certainly wrong about the Eagles and the Chargers. Those were some of the big reasons why I'm at the current state that I'm at right now. 6 of 14 on this past week, and needless to say, it has not been a good start. It's not been a good stretch overall so far in the playoffs, in terms of the power rank, not the power rankings, the predictions overall, but. History is going to change this week. I've got a good feeling about this week, which I said the same thing about last week, so take that for what you will. But we do have our Week 15 matchups here. We start off with a matchup in the NFC South between the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I should tell you that I did not watch most of the games last Sunday because of Steel City Con and the fact that I was so scared to watch the Steelers play the Ravens, not knowing that they would win that game, even though they probably shouldn't have, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. But one of the scores that was really shocking for that day was the fact that the New Orleans Saints at 2-11, somehow, some way found a way to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I had to look to see, did somebody get injured? Did Baker Mayfield have to go out of the game and never came back? No. New Orleans essentially beat them. I mean, they really were unprepared. Tampa Bay was unprepared for that matchup. And I was looking at it going like, what happened? Like, I know Tampa Bay's been banged up, but good Lord, you should have been able to beat the New Orleans Saints. I mean, this isn't Drew Brees is not on the other side of the field, and you're not Tom Brady still, but you're better than the New Orleans Saints, but not that game apparently. And yeah, that dinged them up big time because now Carolina is only a game and a half behind them, and things could get pretty messy in the coming weeks overall for the NFC South in general. But they're going to be taking on the Atlanta Falcons, who once again looked pretty bad well, then again, you're facing the Seattle Seahawks, one of the hottest teams in the NFC, so it makes sense why you're not playing to your strengths right now. And yeah, it's pretty clear why they lost that game because, yeah, Kirk Cousins is definitely not the answer for this team. And yeah, another bust of a. It's definitely looking like a bust of a season for the Falcons, who are now officially eliminated from the playoffs. So that makes some spoilers in this matchup here against Tampa Bay, but I don't think there's going to be enough there for the Falcons to really go in there and pull an upset win against Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay should do just enough to win that game, but it's not going to be enough to make me say that, they're like they were the last couple of seasons. Like they were at the beginning of the season. Remember, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were coming on strong at the beginning of the year, and then in October they just kind of fell off the face of the earth. And they were only getting wins at various points overall. Oh, like they started off 6-2, and then at the bye week they've only won one game since the bye week ended, and it was against Arizona, and that one wasn't even a lopsided game. Arizona came ready to play in that one, so yeah, there is a lot of concern for Tampa Bay going into the stretch run here. You've got to meet Carolina twice, and that's going to really depend on who wins the division overall. It's Carolina. Who would have guessed that at the beginning of the year? But then you have the Miami Dolphins at the end of the month, essentially, who have been on a rise since November. I mean, they have won a lot of games since then. And could play spoiler in that case too, but I think Atlanta should not be a factor in this matchup here. I think Tampa Bay should win just enough to get past the Falcons overall. I have the Buccaneers going to 8-6, Falcons dropping to 4-10. I just don't see a way that Atlanta somehow wins this game unless they just let Bijan Robinson cook and Kyle Pitts and Drake London just go all out with that. If that's the only way you're going to win that game if you're Atlanta, but even then, I don't think it's going to be enough overall. So I'm going to take Tampa Bay to win this one to go to 8-6, Atlanta dropping to 4-10. Following that, on Sunday, our first game of the Sunday window, we have the Cleveland Browns versus the Chicago Bears. The Bears, they were the number 1 seed for about 6 days, and actually more than that, 8 days. And then they go to Green Bay. They lose a close one to the Packers. And we know that they're going to meet again in a couple weeks, and maybe the tables will turn in that one there. But hey, Chicago put an effort into it in the second half overall, but they really need to do that in the first half to really stick with the Green Bay Packers overall. But like I said, 2 weeks from now next week they'll get the revenge overall. But first they got to take on the Cleveland Browns, who despite losing again this week, Shedeur Sanders had his best day overall with the Browns in general, to the point where Kevin Stefanski basically said, all right, we will make Shedeur the starter for the rest of the season, which means that, yeah, the Cleveland Browns have essentially 4 weeks to decide if he is indeed the future of this franchise, which, personally, I think he should be, because, yeah, he is definitely, it's not his fault. I mean, it's his fault that he was in the situation that he was in, but the fact that the Cleveland Browns have been doing a terrible job of putting him in there and then having no choice but to put him in there in that is overall. I mean, it's a conflicting situation overall here, and Shedeur has got 4 big games to prove to everyone that he is the future for this franchise. I mean, they got Chicago this week, then they got Buffalo, then they've got the Steelers, which, I mean, the Browns have had a good job of handling the Steelers in Cleveland the last couple of years, and then you got Cincinnati again, which, whether or not they could be spoiling anybody's party in that point is going to be hard to figure out, because really their season's pretty much over and done with. But yeah, when you have a guy that's thrown for 4 touchdowns and over 399 yards, and then for the stupidest reasons of all, you have him not show up in the big 2-point conversion that could have tied the game, like that, it's mostly on the coaching staff that really is doing a terrible job with him. I'm not going to put the blame on him just yet, but we'll see what happens here. It's a tough task for him overall. You're going to Soldier Field. You're going into a place where the Chicago Bears just lost a heartbreaker to the Packers, and they want to get revenge, and they want to get back to a position of power before they head back into that game. And that's going to be a critical matchup coming up next week for both the Bears and the Packers, this time in Chicago. So, I mean, it's a tough call on this one here. I think Cleveland could go in there and make it competitive, but I am going to go with the Chicago Bears to win this one. I like what they've been doing the last couple of weeks. I think Ben Johnson's the right person to come in there and essentially give this team a lift they really needed. Cleveland will make it close, but I think the Bears will go into this one with a win. Give me the Bears to go to 10-4. Jesus Christ, give me the Bears to go to 10-4. The Browns to drop to 3-11. Following that, this matchup seems familiar. We've got the Cincinnati Bengals hosting the Baltimore Ravens. More than 2 weeks after they met on Thanksgiving. Joe Burrow came back and shocked everybody by beating the Ravens in their home stadium. And, of course, last week the Ravens faced off against the Steelers, where they looked pretty flat for about 3 quarters. And then, towards the end of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter, they started their comeback. And even as a Steelers fan, I think a lot of Steelers fans can agree, Steelers probably shouldn't have won that game. And, of course, you know what I'm talking about. The Isaiah Likely touchdown, which, as I said before, I wasn't watching the game because I figured that they were not going to win that game. The Steelers weren't going to win that game, and yet somehow they did. So I didn't see when the Isaiah Likely touchdown happened. But when I saw what happened afterwards, I looked at it and I said to myself, yeah, that should have been a touchdown, because the whole controversy is the fact that Isaiah Likely didn't make a football-like move. They didn't make a football-like move when he caught the touchdown in the end zone, which, is that really what you're supposed to do now? Like, we've had so many touchdowns when people just grab it in the end zone, and all of a sudden, because Isaiah Likely didn't make a football move, that shouldn't have been that wasn't a touchdown. This is a Steelers fan saying this here, and I think a lot of Steelers fans are saying it too. Hell, Ben Roethlisberger said the exact same thing on his show when he did the live stream of the game. He was saying the exact same thing, that should have been a touchdown, but it wasn't. And for some reason, the Ravens couldn't figure out a way to get back in it at the end, and the Steelers came out with a win in that one. So yeah, that's one of those ones where it's just like, yeah, I can't argue with the Ravens fans on that one. They should have won that game, no question about it. But they get a chance to get revenge on the Cincinnati Bengals, who, of course, as I said before, had that big game against Buffalo. They had a chance to really come back into the AFC North playoff picture, and then Joe Burrow threw those 2 back-to-back interceptions, and that was it. Game over for the Bengals, and essentially the playoffs are pretty much out of reach at this point, and it could be out of reach completely this weekend with a loss to Baltimore, which I do think is going to happen. I think the Ravens are pissed off, at what happened in Cincinnati, what happened against Cincinnati 2 weeks ago, but also what happened against Pittsburgh last week. So they're desperate at this point. They have to win out essentially to keep their hopes alive for the playoffs. But like I said, it's not going to be easy for them because after Cincinnati, you've got New England, which just got flexed in the prime time that day for that game, and then you got to go to Green Bay, and then you got to host the Steelers again. And we'll touch on what the Steelers have schedule is going forward. It's not as easy either, but it's definitely better than what the Ravens have to go through here. So they have to win out at this point to even have a threat of hope of staying alive in the postseason, which in this matchup here, I think they will do. I think the Ravens want to get a win badly so they can get back on track here, and they want revenge for what Cincinnati did to them at their home on Thanksgiving. So I am going to go with the Ravens to win this one, to move back up to 500 at 7-7. Bengals will be eliminated from the playoffs at 4-10, and yeah, I just feel like it's natural that this is going to happen that way. So anyway, moving on here, we have a matchup that just got a lot more interesting than I think anybody expected it to. We've got the Los Angeles Chargers coming off of that big Monday night win against Philadelphia, taking on the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. The Chiefs, man, you blew that game big time. I mean, Houston kept it close for much of the game in general, and I thought, they came out strong in the first half. They got a 10-0 lead early on, but then they did absolutely nothing for most of the game. I mean, I really was afraid that Houston didn't learn their lesson from the last couple of times they played Kansas City, especially in the playoffs. And yeah, it looked like it was going to be a game where, Kansas City's going to come back in this easily. But then Kansas City kept making these boneheaded mistakes that are just, they're baffling to me. And most of them were in the fourth quarter, specifically the two times they went for it on fourth down. Now there was one time where you can argue that was something they needed to do, but you went on for it on 4th and 1 with 10 minutes to go when you didn't really need to. You were still right in the thick of the game, and yet you couldn't figure out a way to win that. And then of course, it's just been a rough year for the Chiefs in general here, and I think a lot of teams are finally realizing that we are sick and tired of being bullies of you bullying us, so we're going to bully you, and that's exactly what they've been doing. Give the Houston Texans a lot of credit for what they did, man. I mean, they went in there and gave the Chiefs a lot of trouble and essentially knocked them out of AFC West contention. And if they're not careful, the Chiefs could be eliminated from the playoffs this week if things work out against them. But they're going to be facing a Chargers team that has been mostly banged up ever since that Week 1 win that still shocked everybody when the Chargers hosted the Chiefs in Brazil and they won that game convincingly. They've had many injuries since then, and yet they've continued to find ways to win. The defense has gotten a whole lot better, and looking at what they did to Philadelphia this past week, 4 interceptions on Jalen Hurts alone. Mahomes should be frightened about this matchup here, but despite all that, I think the Kansas City Chiefs do still have a chance to keep their season alive, and I think they will win this game. I mean, it's going to be tough for the Kansas City Chiefs to really make a playoff push, but if any team is going to do it, it's going to be them. And, the next game after this will be probably their easiest game. I take that back. Their last game is pretty easy, too. Tennessee next week, and then after the Denver Christmas game, they'll be heading to Las Vegas to play the Raiders. And, I mean, by this point, I think Denver pretty much will have the division locked up before that Christmas Day game with the way that they've been playing right now. And I think they will be the team that will lead the AFC West in general when it's all said and done. But I think Kansas City will do whatever they can to stay in it, and I think they have a good chance to stay in it until the very end. So never count out the Chiefs. So I will go ahead and give the Chiefs the win in this one to go to 7-7. Chargers dropping to 9-5. Chargers still in a good position right now, but I think the Chiefs get their revenge for what happened at the start of the season. And then the rematch we've all been waiting for. We have got the New England Patriots hosting the Buffalo Bills. It's the first time these two teams have met each other since Week 5, where New England came into Buffalo and shocked the world by knocking off the then lossless Buffalo Bills to their first loss of the year. And it's been a mixed bag since then for the Buffalo Bills. They have won. They've gotten better since the bye week. They've only had 2 losses since the bye week. New England has been on a hot streak of their own, but looking at their schedule overall, it has been such a cakewalk schedule for them. I mean, when you really look at all the teams they face. I mean, look at the teams they face. Carolina, Buffalo, New Orleans, Tennessee, Cleveland, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, New York Jets, Cincinnati Bengals, New York Giants. The only game that was actually a team that has a winning record right now was the Buffalo Bills. And again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But even then, it was when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had so many injuries on their front there. And, I mean, they were dominating that game overall. So, two of those wins that they had were good wins. And now, here's the crux of your schedule for the New England Patriots. Buffalo, at Baltimore, at the Jets, at the Dolphins. If they can somehow get past Buffalo and Baltimore, they're going to win the AFC. They're going to win the AFC's 1 seed. And I just think Denver has a better chance of winning it. Their schedule is much easier overall. But they get to take on the Buffalo Bills, who we talked about. They did very well against Cincinnati, coming back from them having a lead early on. And I think, kind of like with the Chargers and the Chiefs and the Ravens, they want revenge for what their opponents did to them earlier in the season. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a win for Buffalo overall. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Buffalo is going to do everything they can to get a win against New England, no matter what. Whatever it takes. If people have to get injured to have it happen, so be it. Because, yeah, Buffalo, they're in desperation mode of a win to get back into AFC East contention, and a win will help them stay in there. If they lose, New England not only wins the division, they get a playoff spot in the process. But I think Buffalo will even the score. I think Buffalo goes to 10-4. Patriots will drop to 11-3. Their first loss in 10 games. I just think it's going to happen that way. I think Buffalo is in a better position right now than New England is. Speaking of teams that are in better positions, here's two that are not. You've got the Washington Commanders versus the New York Football Giants. Now, the Giants had their bye week this week, and it's just been a rough season overall for the New York Giants, capped off with an embarrassing loss on Monday night to New England a couple weeks ago. They had their bye week last week. But hey, it could be worse. You could be the Washington Commanders, who your season just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Jaden Daniels suffered another injury. He had to leave the game early. Zach Ertz is now out for the season with a torn ACL. It's just been a rough year for Washington in general. Both of these teams have had a really, really bad season, and they're just waiting right now for the draft, hoping to get better positioning overall, hoping to get players to come in there and help them out. But yeah, it was a bad week for the Washington Commanders, especially with a 31-0 loss to Minnesota of all teams. But yeah, this one is going to be extremely hard to pick because both of these teams are pretty fucking terrible. But I got to choose one of them, and if I have to choose one of them, see, it's really hard because I was really going back and forth between these two in general. I mean, to the Giants' credit, Jackson Dart has been pretty good. Hasn't gotten them wins, but he's been doing pretty good despite not having some key players out there. You know, when you have Cam Scatterboo and Malik Neighbors out for the season, you got to work with what you can. And so far, he's been doing a good enough job, but they're just not getting the wins overall to really keep him in position for it. But I mean, yeah, it's a tough call, so I guess I gotta pick the Commanders, even though they may be starting Marcus Mariota that game. I mean, in terms of which team I think is better positioned to do something, I gotta go with the Commanders this one. It's really a pick'em game here, and I really don't know how it's gonna pan out. This is one of those games that could easily end in a tie because both teams are so terrible right now, but I have to pick a winner, so in this case, I am going to pick the Commanders to go to 4-10 and the Giants to drop to 2-12. It's a tough situation here, but I really don't have a choice in this matchup here. Both teams are pretty fucking terrible. Speaking of teams that are fucking terrible, you can also say the same thing for both of these teams. You've got the 2-11 Las Vegas Raiders going to the 8-5 Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles, it has not been a fun couple of weeks. You lose to Dallas after blowing a 21-0 lead. You do nothing against the Chicago Bears in your home stadium. And then you get dismantled by the Chargers. 5 interceptions, 5 turnovers, and including a critical game-losing interception in overtime. Yeah, it's not been a good run overall. But the good news is you're facing one of the worst teams in football, the Las Vegas Raiders, who once again looked absolutely horrible against the Denver Broncos this past week. But at least, hey, to the Raiders' credit, they scored more than 10 points like they did the last time they faced the Broncos, so I guess there's that. But bottom line, yeah, the Raiders are just, they're like the Giants and the Commanders. They're just waiting for the season to be over so we can go on, so we can get our team better, find a quarterback for the future, and, hopefully by the time the season is over, we don't have to deal with Geno Smith anymore. Kenny Pickett, maybe Kenny Pickett should play the rest of the year overall. In fact, if I was Pete Carroll, I would play Kenny Pickett in this game. I mean, go up against your former team, but they're not going to do that because Pete Carroll and Geno Smith are tied to the hip here, and we got to recreate the old days of the Seattle Seahawks, and yeah, it's just not working out here. I'll just say this. If Philadelphia loses this game to the Raiders, you not only have to fire Patullo, but you also got to fire Nick Sirianni because this is getting ridiculous. And Pete Carroll could be the type of guy to say, hey, guys, let's go shock the world. I know we've been terrible this year, but you know what? We need to go and shock the world. We're going to go into Philadelphia and beat them. I could see them doing that. I really could, but because I'm thinking that this is not going to be the case, but it probably will, I got to pick the Eagles, even though I'm not comfortable with that. But like I said, if the Eagles lose to the Raiders, heads need to roll ASAP. So yeah, I'm going with the Eagles to go to 9-5 and the Raiders to drop to 2-12. If the Raiders somehow lose this game, all hell is going to break loose on the other side of the state. I'll just tell you that much. Here we go with another lopsided game, except one of these teams is actually really good. We've got the New York Jets traveling down to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. And the Jaguars continue their streak against the Indianapolis Colts, they were dominant all across the board, but let's be honest, the Jacksonville Jaguars overall had some help because simply of the fact that Daniel Jones suffered a terrible ACL injury that knocks him out for the rest of the year. And we'll talk about what the Colts are doing because this is a quote genius move by the Colts team overall, but the Jaguars were mostly dominant in that game. It wasn't even close, and once again, continuing that long streak of Indianapolis going to Jacksonville and getting a loss in that one. It's now 12 years in a row for the Jacksonville Jaguars to beat the Colts in Jacksonville. It's a stretch that for some reason just continues to happen here. And it put them in the position of the number one place in the AFC South right now. And they're in good position. And their schedule overall is very favorable. Their toughest game coming up is the one next week, and that's against the Denver Broncos. But other than that, you've got the Jets, you've got a Daniel Jones-less Indianapolis Colts team, and then the Tennessee Titans. So they should be in prime position to win the AFC South. And if they're not, it's just going to be it's something must have happened to Trevor Lawrence or something like that. But no real surprises in this matchup here. I'm going with the Jaguars. Jaguars, I think, are just a much better team in this matchup here. The Jets are nothing right now. I mean, they don't even have their quarterbacks right now. Justin Fields is out for the long run. Tyrod Taylor got an injury, and they started who did they start this past week? Brian Cook, I think it was. Whoever Cook was for the Jets. Who was it? Let me see. Brady Cook. I'm sorry, Brady Cook. But it doesn't matter because they're probably gonna lose this one here. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the Jaguars to go to 10-4, get themselves one step closer to potentially locking up the AFC South, and the Jets dropping to 3-11 because yeah, NPJ never picking Jets ever again. Following that, yet another lopsided battle. We've got the Houston Texans hosting the Arizona Cardinals. And Arizona, once again, looks pretty bad against the Los Angeles Rams. We talked about the Houston Texans and what they did against Kansas City. So this one could be really quick. I'm picking the Texans. I just don't think the Cardinals have anything left in them. I mean, they're just struggling to get by. They're waiting for the season to end, just like all these other teams we mentioned. And I don't think they're going to beat Houston in this one here. I think Houston's going to continue their fight against Jacksonville to win the division. And I think it's a good stretch for them right now. They're on a high right now after what they did to Kansas City. So yeah, give me the Texans to win this one to go to 9-5. Arizona dropping to 3-11. And then we get to some of the biggest matchups of the weekend. A couple of critical ones in the 425 window. Starting off with the one on CBS, we've got the Green Bay Packers coming off of their big win against Chicago, taking on the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are currently the AFC's number 1 seed. The Green Bay Packers are currently the NFC's 2 seed. In what could potentially be a Super Bowl preview with these two teams in general. If the Green Bay continues the pace that it's on right now, and so is Denver, they could be the two teams that could be representing the AFC and the NFC in Super Bowl 60 in Los Angeles, in San Francisco this February. Denver coming off of that big win against the Raiders. Green Bay coming off of that big win against Chicago. This is a really tough one to pick overall, but because this is being played in Denver, I have to give the advantage to the Denver Broncos. I think Green Bay will make it a close matchup in this one, But I think Denver will continue that magic they've had in the fourth quarter all year long. I mean, it's been the fourth quarter. They've been pretty good in one-score games overall. So Green Bay will try to make this a one. It'll be close all across the board, but I think Denver will have that magic left in them to continue on this pace that they're on right now. And I think they should go into this one and win this one. If it was in Green Bay, I would say the Packers. I think it is going to be a very close game between these two really good teams. I think the Broncos win this one here. Give me the Broncos to go to 12-2 and clinch a playoff berth, and have the Green Bay Packers going to 9-4-1. And then for the Packers, it's that critical matchup coming up next week, a rematch against the Chicago Bears. And for the Broncos, a big matchup in their own right when they face the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then we have a big matchup here that could potentially be, well, I don't want to say a playoff preview at this point, considering one team, but we've got the Detroit Lions taking on the Los Angeles Rams. The Matthew Stafford Bowl number 3. And, the Rams in particular started the year. He's got a big win last week against the Arizona Cardinals. Lions got a big win against Dallas. We kind of touched on this stuff already. So now you want to know who's going to win this matchup here. And I think it's going to be very, very close in this one. I mean, both teams are really good. The Rams have been really solid all year long. Matthew Stafford having an MVP caliber season. But Jared Goff and company got that big win against Dallas to get them back on track. So really, it's a matchup that can go either way when you really look at it all together. Detroit needs to essentially win out to have a chance at the NFC North title with Chicago and Green Bay ahead of them. But the Rams know that this coming Thursday, they've got a big matchup in Seattle against the Seahawks. So, like I said, both of these teams, it could really go one way or the other. It's like the Packers and Broncos. It really can go one way or the other at this point. And, I think the Rams, with the home field advantage, I think they will have the upper hand in this one here. I'm going to take the Rams to go to 11-3 and the Lions to drop to 8-6. And their chances of making the playoffs become more and more alarming as the weeks go on, because next week they got the Steelers, and of course the Steelers are fighting for their playoff lives as well. So that should be a very intriguing matchup coming up next week for the Lions. But for the Rams, I think they get a win in this one, move to 11-3. Following that, we have got the Carolina Panthers going to New Orleans to take on the Saints. The Saints coming off of that unexpected win against Tampa Bay last Sunday. Tyler Shough having a pretty good game overall. Carolina coming off the bye week. Last time we saw them, they got whooped by San Francisco. But Carolina is in the best position they have been for a long, long time, sitting at 7-6, sitting above 500, and sitting in contention potentially to usurp the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the division title, which will begin next weekend. And Carolina's schedule overall looks a lot better than Tampa Bay's schedule does. But they got New Orleans this week, then they host Tampa Bay next week, and then they'll see them again for the Week 18 finale, which could be a Sunday Night Football Week 18 finale for that one, for the division in that one. But then Seattle in the middle there. We'll see where Seattle is at that point in that game, but in terms of the standings. But yeah, they should go into New Orleans and continue the momentum they've been building. They haven't won back-to-back games since Week 7. They've lost a game, then they win a game, they lose a game, they lost another one, and they lost to the New Orleans Saints last time around. So Carolina's probably going to be looking to seek some revenge in this one here. I've got Carolina to go to 8-6, New Orleans to drop to 3-11. And then we have the Tennessee Titans taking on the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco coming off a bye week of their own. And you have the Tennessee Titans getting their second win of the season against the Cleveland Browns. The best game they've had all season long, although Cleveland did make it close towards the end. But in the end, it was just not enough for Cleveland to win that one. And Tennessee gets their second win of the season. Tennessee's kind of in that same predicament as some other teams we talked about. They're just waiting for the season to end at this point for them. And they're going to have a tough task going into San Francisco to face the 49ers, who, despite all their injuries, still hanging in there at this point in terms of their divisional hopes and all that. So yeah, needless to say, I think San Francisco continues that trend, even though they have so many injuries. It baffles me why they're still winning, but that's just kind of this year. It's been a baffling year overall, so yeah, give me the 49ers to go to 10-4 and the Tennessee Titans to drop to 2-12. And then, oh boy, this matchup, oh my God. We've got the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks, coming off of their big win against Atlanta, it was not even close. The Colts coming off of their big loss against Jacksonville, which wasn't even close. And it didn't help that Daniel Jones suffered a season-ending ACL injury, and Riley Leonard had to come in and finish the job for the Colts, and it wasn't bad, but it was certainly not what they expected overall. But it's okay, everybody. The Colts have figured out their solution for the rest of the season. Daniel Jones is out for a long period of time. Anthony Richardson still has the orbital fracture in his eye from that freak injury. Riley Leonard's their starting QB right now, but don't worry. They have figured out their quarterback problems. They have gone back into the well. They have found an old quarterback who's been out for a couple of years now, and they're saying, buddy, we know we gave you a bad rap, but come on back, baby. We need you now more than ever. So they went ahead and called up Philip Rivers. Oh. Philip Rivers? 44-year-old Philip Rivers, who hasn't played football in 5 years. They called him up and said, Phil, buddy, I know that you've been dealing with your 87,000 kids and grandkids, but you know what? Our team is desperate. You mind coming out of retirement to come and finish the last 4 games of the season and becoming our quarterback again? And apparently that was it was just announced today that he signed back on here. So, yeah, the Colts have brought back Philip Rivers after all these years. Like, you couldn't have gone to Tom Brady and say, hey, buddy, the Raiders are terrible right now. Want to come play for us and see if you can win another championship? You should have called Ben Roethlisberger. He's not doing anything right now. But Philip Rivers, man, Philip Rivers. Why'd you stop there? I mean, why did you try to go call Peyton Manning? Like, is Andrew Luck so pissed off with the Colts for how they treated him overall that he basically said, yeah, I'm not taking any calls from you again? Just the Colts, man. You're making the Cleveland Browns look better by comparison. And they just said this week, Deshaun Watson will be back next year, and he'll have a chance to start again. Just like, I thought that was the worst. I thought that was the biggest clown show of the NFL, but nope. The Colts continue to do that. Remember, folks, this is the Colts team that fired Frank Reich and brought in Jeff Saturday, who had never coached before in the National Football League, had never had a coaching position except for high school, and they brought him in, and that was a disaster on their own funds. But hey, it's good to know that the ghost of Jim Irsay is possessing his daughters and Chris Ballard and everybody who looked at this and didn't think, this is a horrible fucking idea. It's just like, fuck it, man. Let's go for it. Yeah, we're the Colts. We've gambled everything for this, and we're going to make sure we do everything we can. We're going all in, baby. Yeah, you did go all in, because guess what? You don't have a quarterback. You don't have a first-round pick next year because of the Sauce Gardner trade. And guess what? Sauce Gardner's out for the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, you're pretty fucked. You're pretty fucked right now. I mean, just, wow. Wow, what a terrible, terrible decision from one of the worst teams in football. I mean, this is a cluster of a mess, man. But yeah, I think you get the idea. Seattle should mop the floor with the Colts in this one here. Give me the Seattle Seahawks to go to 11-3. The Colts dropping to 8-6, but the Colts will win the Clowns of the NFL award this year for sure. I mean, yeah, you're making the Cleveland Browns look more dignified by comparison by this stupid decision. Philip friggin' Rivers, man. My God. So then, on Sunday Night Football, we have got the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Dallas Cowboys. We talked about the Cowboys. They lost a critical game against the Detroit Lions. I mean, they were in it for most of it, and then they just couldn't get the job done. Detroit looked like they were desperate need of a win more than the Cowboys were, even though the Cowboys are sitting right now at 6-1. I mean, and believe it or not, they still are very much alive for the division because of how badly Philadelphia has botched themselves after November. But they're going to be taking on the Minnesota Vikings, who just shut out the Washington Commanders. J.J. McCarthy had his best game of the year so far, despite the fact that Justin Jefferson essentially has become a non-factor the last couple of weeks. I mean, the Vikings are winning these games, but then again, it's mostly because their their opponents have been pretty fucking terrible. And but Washington is also terrible too. I mean, Washington was terrible too, but Minnesota is still finding ways to win in these matchups here, but they're not going to make the playoffs here. They're the weak link of this division. The next 2 games could be wins that they could probably try to salvage the season, but then again, you got Detroit and then Green Bay, who are looking to Detroit's especially looking to get revenge for what happened in November, and Green Bay is trying to sweep the season in what could be a game that could eventually steal the division for them. So yeah, it's going to be a tough road ahead for them. But in this matchup here, the Cowboys, I think, have a lot more to play for than the Vikings do with how badly the Eagles are. I mean, Jerry Jones and company probably looked at what happened on Monday night and said, oh, thank God, we still have a chance in this one here. So, and they've been playing very good at home, so it's not going to surprise me at all if Dallas wins this one. That's my pick for this one here. I'm going to go with the Cowboys to go to 7-6-1. Minnesota dropping to 5-9. I think by that point they're out of playoff contention at this point, if I'm not mistaken. And then we have our Monday Night Football showdown between the Miami Dolphins and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers, hey, I've been calling them AIDS all season long, and I still stand by that. I don't think they're that good. They're as good as they think they are. But I'll give them this: they got a desperate win when they needed it the most. Even though, like I said, that was probably a win that they didn't really deserve overall. But at the same time, I mean, hey. It ended up working out in their favor. They still managed to find a way to win. And again, the first half, they looked pretty good. But the biggest problem with this team in general, for the most part, all season long, is that they haven't made those significant changes in the second half that has really caused them to lose these critical matchups here. Like this one here. This one could have also been a critical matchup they could have lost. But nevertheless, they did manage to find a way to win this one. And they put a pretty good game plan together for the most part. But, again, that second half overall was not really that strong for them. But they're going to be taking on the Miami Dolphins, who, after a 2-7 start to the season, they have won 4 straight and have found ways to win games against the Buffalo Bills. Their schedule overall has been pretty easy. Their toughest game was the Buffalo Bills, but they beat Washington and Madrid. They beat the Saints. They beat the Jets. And now, like I said before, this is where they can become extremely dangerous. But the one thing that is holding the Miami Dolphins back in this matchup here is the fact that Miami is usually pretty terrible in cold weather games. And guess what the temperature is going to be this coming Monday in Acrisure Stadium in downtown Pittsburgh? 15 degrees is going to be the low temperature on Monday night next week. And if I remember correctly, Miami is pretty fucking terrible in cold weather games. In fact, if you look at the statistics for the Miami Dolphins in cold weather, their record is they currently have a 10-game losing streak, recently under 40-degree weather, before they broke it in. No, they didn't. They didn't break it in 2024. It's because they lost that game. They lost that game in Kansas City. It says here on Google. Well, then again, it's the AI saying that. It's the AI basically saying that too, because and that's basically changing that whole thing. But the idea here is simply that Miami is terrible in cold weather games. The last one they played in was in Green Bay on Thanksgiving night, and they lost at Lambeau Field. They've lost 10 straight in cold weather games. 11 straight now, if you include the loss to the Green Bay Packers last Thanksgiving. So yeah, this is a game that easily favors the Steelers, and I would say the Steelers win. But this is also the type of game that the Steelers also tend to lose, where they're a favorite in this one here, but you have a team that's getting hot at the right time with the Miami Dolphins, and there's a possibility that they could find a way to sneak in there. They're going to need a lot of help to do so, but this is like 2021 all over again. This team has a chance to potentially win out and get to 10-7, and maybe, just maybe, might be a team that sneaks into the playoffs at the 7th spot, which could be alarming for a number of teams that have to face them, but again, this is a game that the Pittsburgh Steelers should win. The odds are in their favor, but just something in the back of my head, and just the fact that this is the type of game the Steelers should win, but always tend to lose, that has me extremely worried that this will probably happen again. The Miami Dolphins will break that narrative about losing cold weather games, and the Dolphins will somehow come out with a win in this one here. Mostly because the Steelers have been so inconsistent both on offense and defense. Even though the Steelers have the best chance to win the division right now because of their schedule being a little bit better than what the Ravens have to go through here. I mean, their toughest game coming up is the Detroit Lions. And that's going to be one where if they somehow win against Miami this Monday and then go into Detroit and beat the Lions, they can pretty much lock up the division before they even face Baltimore in Week 18. It would be a non-factor at that point, but they should win this game. They probably will win this game, but I just got that feeling in the back of my head that this is a game that they won't show up for because they have been pretty bad in primetime games this season. They've lost all 3 of their primetime matchups this year. This is their last one before possibly maybe getting another one in Week 18 and maybe in the playoffs if they make it there. Steelers should win this one, but I just have that feeling that the Dolphins are going to find a way to win this one. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I think the Dolphins will somehow sneak out a win with a possible field goal at the end. I'm going to take the Dolphins to go to 7-7 and the Steelers to drop to 7-7. I mean, it's definitely one where I'm putting a huge gamble on this one here, but I just got a bad feeling that the Dolphins are going to find a way to win this one. It just feels like it's going to come down to that overall. So yeah, there you go. Those are my Week 15 NFL predictions. So just to recap my list here, I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the Atlanta Falcons, the Bears over the Browns, the Ravens over the Bengals, the Chiefs over the Chargers, the Bills over the Patriots, the Commanders over the Giants, the Eagles over the Raiders, the Jaguars over the Jets, the Texans over the Cardinals, the Broncos over the Packers, the Rams over the Lions, the Panthers over the Saints, the 49ers over the Titans, the Seahawks over the Colts, the Cowboys over the Vikings, and the Dolphins over the Steelers. And by the end of Week 15, we should have a pretty good idea of where everybody stands and who's more than likely to seal up their positioning in the playoffs, which some might say we're looking at it right now, but these last 4 weeks could be really big difference makers for a number of different teams here. So buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. It is going to be a bumpy ride indeed. So with all that said, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the NFL Network for this week. If you like what you saw and want to see more videos like this, please go ahead and hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification button. Check out our last episode we did. Check out the playlist as well. And I will see you guys next week for another episode as we look back on Week 15 and look ahead to the weekend before Christmas 2025. So thanks for watching this. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. The following has been a presentation of the Reviewing Network Sports.